Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber, and we have a couple of guests with us today.
I'm Shelley.
Taryn.
And today we are going to be talking about the recreational side of drugs, since we were talking about the nootropics last time. After the microphones went off, the discussion kind of went other places, and we said, hey, we should record this as well, because this sounds interesting. So, I am the kind of person who believed everything they told me in school, and things have changed a little bit, but I have never done drugs, and I've always been deathly afraid of them. And I have been hearing recently from a lot of people that maybe drugs are kind of a interesting thing to try now and then. And you guys are here to convince me of this, I guess.
Well, I actually have a perspective similar to your own in that I didn't do any recreational drugs unless you count caffeine. I probably wouldn't.
I don't think caffeine's recreational.
No.
You do
I mean, for
caffeine
some
for
people
work.
it is.
It can be useful, but it doesn't ever make you like happy, right?
Yeah, it's not euphoric.
It's for some people
me
it
happy.
does.
Oh, does it really?
It makes you happy if you need caffeine to function. 'Cause you're just not happy without it. So it's like you get it in you and you're like, normal.
Yeah, my husband has what I believe is a purely placebo effect. Whereas as soon as the Mountain Dew touches his lips, he's like, oh my gosh, everything is great.
Okay.
So,
Before his body's had any time to...
Right.
Yeah.
So I hadn't done any recreational drugs until last year. And I am in my 30s.
And did they destroy your life?
Not yet.
Working on it.
But so I still have not done alcohol or cannabis, which are the most common recreational drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went straight from so I think, Eneasz, when you're talking about the stuff they told you in school, you're thinking DARE program.
Yes.
Which, to those who are unfamiliar, you could probably Google Reefer Madness videos on YouTube, which is the propaganda films from, I don't know, the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Well, see, even when I was in middle school, I knew marijuana was basically harmless.
I see.
Everyone
Really?
knew at that
Wow.
point, just because it's used so widely by so many people.
But they talk about it so the DARE program was this drug scare tactic thing that they had people go around to schools, and it was always sort of whenever they talked about it, they'd be basically cautioning oh yeah, marijuana, okay, we can no longer say, because people have books and stuff now, that it's going to destroy your life, but it's a gateway drug. It's it'll first you have a marijuana's, then you're going straight to heroin, and
Fun fact about DARE, it actually increases drug use.
Yeah.
how would it increase drug use?
Because, and this totally makes sense, when I was in the DARE program anyway, and I think they still do this, they tell you don't ever do any of the hard drugs like heroin or ecstasy or anything like that, because as soon as you do it, it'll be so amazing. That's all you will ever think about for the rest of your life. You'll become an instant hardcore junkie addict. And it's basically not true. And a lot of people... Okay, so I recently read a very interesting article from New York Times, I think it was, about a guy who was talking about how he became a heroin addict. And he said no one shoots up the first time they do heroin. That's just... You don't do that. That is hardcore. You don't put needles in you. What you do is you get some painkillers that someone got from their doctor. They got a little extra. They brought some to the party. You grind it up, and you feel good. You have a good time. And the next morning you wake up, and there's no hangover, and... you're not addicted. You just go about living your normal life. And so you're like, oh, there's actually nothing to worry about. And so then he started taking it more and more, and eventually got to the point where it would be cheaper just for me to buy smack and shoot it into my veins than to keep going with these prescription pills.
Yeah.
And that's how, you get to the thing. So if people just were more realistic and be like, hey, kids, this is a bad idea, and here's why.
Yeah.
As opposed to you do it one time and your life is over, and then you do it one time and well, everything I've been told is a lie.
Yep.
So
Wait, you mean the lies have unintended bad consequences? That sounds relevant. Did you ever take any opioids for pain management before you started experimenting with real drugs?
I was given a largest quantity of Vicodin after surgery, and I took one, and that was it.
Okay.
Hardcore. You're just gonna ride it out, or did it
No,
not
I was
agree with you, or?
I mean, I thought it may have helped the pain, but then after I stopped, I took one, and then after that, I was like, I don't really need any more, so whatever. Yeah.
Smart.
I had the same thing where
Most people don't do that with their leftover opioids.
It's interesting because a lot of people, I've even known some people that developed problem. Well, I knew one person that developed a problem with it, but I took it and I never felt high. I just felt like the pain went away And then I fell asleep about 10 minutes later. It made me incredibly sleepy. And, that's fine, because that's all I want, is to not be feeling pain at the time. But no, apparently with some people it has a much stronger effect where they actually get happy. I feel very glad that I didn't have that happy high, because I tend to have, this is the main reason I'm worried about drugs. I tend to have a rather addictive personality type. Like if I get into a game, I will do nothing but play that game for a while. And I tend to get that way with anything that I really enjoy. So if I really like the drug, I would probably have issues with it. I have that issue with alcohol.
There's different ways you can like stuff, though. Like psychedelics usually operate on serotonin instead of dopamine. So even though you like them, you're not as likely to actually build like reward circuits in your brain that will end up, reinforcing bad habits with them.
I'm very dopamine driven in general, so I would probably get addicted.
Yeah, we all are.
I mean, but I hate serotonin. Yeah, it just makes me feel like I don't like this kind of happiness, and why is it taking over my brain with this weird happiness? No, the serotonin kind.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, from a drug perspective, because you experience serotonin and you probably like it in everyday experience.
Maybe,
but whenever it's pushed over the natural limits.
Perhaps. But I have like a general depression throughout most of my life, and so I think I'm lower serotonin in general, probably, and also the SSRI style drugs don't do that much for me.
Yeah.
So what was it that got you to try your first drug?
Well, part of it actually was the rationalist community.
Peer pressure.
I am ashamed of my community now.
So, I had heard from various people, like even one time doing psychedelic or hallucinogenic drug could have permanent positive effects on your life.
Taryn has said the same thing, and that is one of the things that really worries me. I do not want my utility function to be fucked with right now. Maybe like if I get to a point in my life where I'm not happy with who I am, then I would be more willing to take those drugs. But I don't want things to permanently change me. And Taryn is like saying he said basically like any war hawks who took some LSD would be like no longer as into going to war with things.
I would imagine. I'm sure there's outliers and stuff like that, but generally, I doubt too many jarheads could do a lot of LSD and still feel as good about.
Why?
It's just you feel less separate, I think, from other people, at least in my experience. And MDMA is probably another big one that would make it generally very hard. I think those are the two ones whenever we're talking about like recreational drugs you should probably stick to. A lot of the stuff outside of MDMA and LSD I don't think has as many therapeutic uses.
Yeah, actually that was my impression too when I was considering what I wanted to do. Probably I'm not going to do MDMA, although I have heard definitely about the therapeutic uses, but psychedelics in particular. Yeah.
So why not MDMA?
It's certainly more dangerous.
Yeah.
Is it dangerous?
Fine. Or I guess, can you expand on dangerous?
Yeah.
Well, MDMA is neurotoxic to a higher degree than LSD.
Neurotoxic like alcohol is neurotoxic, or neurotoxic like neurotoxin is neurotoxic?
I don't know enough about it to relate those two, but generally MDMA is less safe than psychedelics.
Have you found yourself being stupider the last few years?
In ways, but pleasant ways. I'm not as focused on just I'm not as I'm can appreciate my own experience more and appreciate being present more rather than just living for the future quite as much, and that's something that I've thoroughly enjoyed.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I like living for the future.
I think one way of thinking about that though is that if your only drive is for like future stuff, that's where like all of like the Buddhist talks about like why people are so miserable all the time. That's exactly it, right?
Well, I mean,
So
that is a big part of both my misery and my drive in life, though. It's that part that the drive is like, I want there to be something of me in the future. I want to make a difference. So I'm working on that. But then there's also the misery where eventually, a few hundred years, everything dies, nothing matters. Any contribution I will have made will have wiped out. Like, who remembers any? I guess Shakespeare and Homer have lasted, but even them, it's eventually it won't matter. Even if you have like an amazing critically acclaimed book that's bestseller, 100 years from now, no one's going to remember it.
yeah, I think I was more thinking about just living day to day.
Oh yeah,
And
no.
so you're thinking about like, instead of like, man, I'm kind of enjoying, right now I'm, between, it's like 10 a.m. I'm having coffee or whatever, rather than like just living in constant anticipation of like, oh man, I can't wait till this, or, I'm waiting for 12:30 and then I can do this. Like just being able to sit and bask and relax and be where you are for that minute. I think that's more what you're getting
Yeah,
at, right?
it was very hard for me to do nothing before.
But that's very unproductive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, but if I'm doing nothing between the hours of 10:30 and noon, those are an hour and a half that I could have been, working on a podcast or a book or something.
All of this is just like, man, I should be using drugs a lot. I know.
Join us in the productive side.
I'm currently doing a lot of nothing, and I'm, I could use a kind of brain reset. Let's just do it.
Well,
if I'm gonna be doing nothing, I might as well be happy doing nothing.
But unfortunately, drugs do have like a big image issue where you think that, it's just a dichotomy. You're either, completely this, oh man, it's all just peace and love. And, or you're like completely grinding away in the machine to make more money for the man or whatever, like.
Or make more difference to the future.
Yeah, totally. But you can, responsible drug use is something that exists. It's just, a lot of people who are responsible drug users probably don't go around their office advertising it quite as much because there's a stigma against it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big reasons for legalization for a lot of these things is just to make it so people can talk about their responsible drug use and kind of break the stigmas of, oh, you do LSD once and heroin's next, like.
I guess it's one of the things I kind of like about alcohol is that no matter how much you drink, the next day you won't be drunk anymore. You can go back to how you were. You may not be productive the next day, depending on how much you drank.
Well, it changes you over time for sure.
Okay.
And also some recreational drugs can boost productivity.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure you could consider microdosing LSD as fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it.
But does help a lot of people.
I wouldn't call it recreational at that point. Whenever I think of like doing drugs recreationally, I think of doing them without the purpose of improving my life outside of the recreational drugs. Like if you're.
But what if you're trying to improve your like? I guess some people who are into spirituality or whatever, they take drugs for that purpose to improve their spiritual journey or whatever.
Yeah.
So I know
that's still recreational to me.
Yeah.
I think.
Maybe my definition is off, but.
Well, I think there's two different goals there, right? One is to have a great time. Another is to be a serious scholar about your own mind or something, right? So while they're both probably, I guess, recreational, isn't they're not like prescription use, but there's, if you're doing Molly at a party to, roll and have a great time, that's different than like, I'm going to try this sitting at home, watch, and relax with a best friend or something. Those are very different environments, and you're probably taking it with a different goal, but you're still using an illegal drug recreationally, I guess.
you said you also used to be against drugs very much until you heard Sam Harris talking about them.
It's a very good podcast.
I still haven't listened to it.
That's okay.
I've never heard it either.
It was actually, I think, his first actual podcast episode. There were a couple like lead up ones, but it's second or third, and he just read the essay that he published. I read it shortly after it was new some years ago. I can't remember when, and it took me more off the fence. So like I hadn't really used. I think I'd tried marijuana a few times at that point, but I was pretty much like, well, I'm not going to try anything that'll radically alter my perception of reality, because I kind of had like this like hardcore like James Randi and outlook on drug use, and James Randi and like Penn Jillette and people in that community. A lot of them don't use drugs because they're like, well, and they don't even drink.
Yeah.
They're like, well, yeah, I mean, the whole point of being a seriously scientifically minded person is having a commitment to always perceiving the world as unobtruse or as clearly as possible. And
I'm kind of on board with that myself.
I am
so
too.
I am too. I think what changed my mind was that like it's not like if you were to get drunk once, you're submitting to a life of never being able to perceive reality accurately again, right? It's like if you were drunk forever, that'd be a pretty serious issue.
So you're taking a break.
You take a break. I mean, it's just like I feel like taking that philosophy, and I might not have been giving it the best steel man I could, but if your whole thing is to observe reality as directly as possible, well, like then you're never going to waste time like empathizing with a fictional character, right? So like I mean, as long as you're
Observing
willing to
beautiful art or anything.
yeah, you're going to be taking different levels of seriousness with whenever you want to, focus on being scientifically minded, right? So I wouldn't want to go forth and do science while, rolling on LSD. But if it's the weekend and I'm like, well, this is how I'm going to spend my time, and I guess it's the kind of thing that you can turn off and it's not a permanent commitment to losing your mind.
But I kind of disagree with the idea that when you're empathizing with a fictional character or that kind of thing, that you're being deluded and you're not in touch with reality. Like you are looking into your own brain. You're experiencing part of yourself and your imagination. That's not like false information. Like fiction is different from lies.
That's true. I might be rolling with that counter argument too hard, but maybe like playing video games, or I guess no, because you're playing a video game. If you suddenly lost the fact that you're playing the video game.
But I'm assuming when you're hallucinating, you're hallucinating, right?
Yeah. You can lose that. And that's whenever you have things like timelessness and stuff like that experience.
One of the reasons I don't want to do alcohol is I feel like that one in particular would distort my thinking in a way that I didn't experience on psychedelics so far.
So it totally distorts your thinking. But again, it's only for like a temporary time. The thing is, I can get as high with really good music and just dancing and letting the music flow over me as I ever have with alcohol. And so I consider that, or certain works of written art. It's not as strong as music or as consistent as music, but every now and then it can. In my opinion anyway, it brings me to a mentally altered state too sometimes.
Yeah, you can experience probably a lot of what people usually take away from MDMA and LSD just by living a lifetime of meditation, like in really focusing on altering that state of consciousness and putting yourself into a different state of consciousness. Or you could just take LSD and get a lifetime of experience and,
I've heard some scary stories about meditation. In fact.
Really?
Yeah. People meditated so much they had a psychotic break.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think that there are people for whom meditation isn't for them. Yeah. Like you have to be the ultimate judge, kind of just like, deciding whether or not you could handle drugs. But, if you feel like opening the doors to your mind a little bit, if you feel like you're, barely holding on, or, if you have this sort of anxiety about what might come forward or something. I've never found meditation that transformative.
Yeah.
Rather like, I found it a little transformative in my day-to-day life, but I've never had, like an enlightened experience or anything like that, right? It's probably a bad analogy, but it just is the first thing that came to my mind. If you're looking at like buying a gun and you get one of like the handbooks from a store, the first thing it'll say on like page 1 is like, make sure you feel like you're a good person to own a gun. And if you're not, great, you made a good decision, like to not buy it. So like, I feel like it's just like, really another decision that could change your life, have some idea of what you're getting into, and if, make an honest appraisal of whether or not it's good for you, right?
That's another reason I'm really worried about hallucinogens. Like I keep hearing like they are the good type of drug and you should be okay taking it, but like
Not
the
everybody,
reason
it's luck and genetics,
like the reason I am down with alcohol is that it alters your mood without altering your perception. And I have a lot of problems with reality. Not a lot anymore because I've managed to work ways around it. But in general, I have some trouble with reality testing. Mm-hmm. And I am terrified that a hallucinogen would just shatter all that. And I'd be
You'll go there
stuck
and never
again
come back.
Yeah, in the place where I was, where I don't know what's real.
I'm very interested in hearing more about this if you care to describe it.
The reality testing part?
Yeah. Or like what the the worst places
Getting a
that
little
you've been with
intimate in
that?
here.
Oh God, I don't want to go too far into. I think
right.
I don't know. It couldn't have been just my religious background because a lot of people have religious backgrounds, but I took that shit like seriously, and it makes a difference when you know that there is someone who has warm feelings about you, but is literally watching every single thing you do all the time. And it was just one of the reasons I've never really had a problem with mass surveillance or things of that nature, because I'm like, I lived for years under constant mass surveillance. What are you fuckers scared of? It's and my main breakdowns is in trying to figure out if anything is real, and the worst part is when I doubt other people's existence. Like not a lot of times, but sometimes I'm like, suffering in third world countries can't really be real. There can't be something that awful actually in existence. It must be some sort of like simulated reality thing, and we're being told about the suffering in those countries so that we have like goals to work to make the world better, or that we can feel better about our lives. But in no universe could that actually be the thing. No one could suffer that much. And then like if I meet someone who's gone through awful things, I'm like, this person real, or were they created in the past week or so to intrude on my life? And then I start thinking, is anyone real?
Oh, wow.
Is it just me? Or what are you guys doing in this room? Are you here because I am a narcissistic person that wants to have a podcast?
So what did you do? What were your strategies?
My strategy is not to think about that shit.
Oh, okay.
Just put it in a box.
Yeah, accept on faith that other people are real and reality does exist, and not to engage any solipsists when they try to talk to me about things. I'm like, you know what? Fuck you.
If it helps you feel any better, I feel very real.
Yeah. Which is something you would say to try to convince me.
I mean, through that lens, there's literally nothing I can say,
Right.
or do.
That is the problem.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie The 13th Floor?
No.
Good. Don't.
Oh,
I don't think you'd like it.
Oh man,
So,
that's
yeah.
a harsh one. Yeah.
Another follow-up personal question, which you don't want to answer. I don't know. What about? Isn't there some part of your genetic background that plays into?
Very
this?
likely. Everyone in my immediate family has mental issues, except maybe my mother. She might just have issues because she has to deal with the rest of us. But definitely my dad and all my siblings. And I don't know about my wider family because they're in the old world. I don't have any contact with them. I know my grandfather on my dad's side was a alcoholic to the point where he was kicked out of his home and then died in a gutter a few decades later. So they certainly some issues, but I don't know how bad they are.
Coincidentally, my Facebook memories just showed me an article I posted exactly a year ago, which is a Slate Star Codex article. It's about how early psychedelic researchers were really weird, but it also mentioned a recent study, a 2011 study, showing. Oh, wait, that was a different study. But okay, it was just mentioned that most studies on safety of psychedelics show that it doesn't lead to increased incidence of psychiatric illness.
Yeah, I think there's not as much worry about it increasing the incidence of psychiatric illness, but bringing out or accelerating the development of psychiatric illnesses that are already present. And I think that's where people really worry about it.
I guess I would want to check on that evidence. Because,
Yeah.
I mean...
it's
it did
hard
sound-
because there's not
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot of research on these things
But
for some reason.
The 2011 study that I was mixing it up with was the one that said that after one dose, I think it was a high dose of psilocybin, participants in the study generally showed a permanent increase in the openness domain of their personality, which is very significant because personality just doesn't change after you're an adult.
And psilocybin, for those who are not familiar, is the active ingredient in hallucinogenic mushrooms.
Yes. I, by the way, did mushrooms, and I did not notice that I got more open.
Okay. You're still the cold, closed-off person that you always were.
Like I've always wanted to be.
Nice.
Honestly, though, like I really don't want to become more open.
Okay. Well, no, that's good then.
And neither with acid, I don't feel like I got more open.
Do you feel like anything else about you changed in a permanent way?
No. And I will relate some things that I have heard from others. One person told me that after trying, I forget which hallucinogen it was that he tried, but it was probably the first like seriously mind altering drug that he had tried. And he's like, wow, happiness is chemical. Like I kind of knew it, but now I really understand like happiness is chemical. And I don't feel bad about getting treatment for my depression now because,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it can. I mean, a lot of the positive effects I think that people get from it are just confronting things that they haven't confronted before, as far as like psychedelics and MDMA as well. I don't know why really that ties in, but
Well,
I think that like,
Yeah.
you know, he doesn't think that maybe the drugs are bad, and he kind of confronted.
Yeah, and then also just the sense that you don't have to buy into the things your depression tells you because it's chemical.
How do you feel about addiction in these drugs? Like, what is the risk?
For what kind of drugs?
Well, okay. Are the only ones that you've taken the hallucinogens?
No, I've done. I mean, MDMA is probably the one that has affected me the most in my life.
But that's also a hallucinogen, right?
I think in a way, I've heard people call it a hallucinogen before, but I don't know how accurate that is.
All right. What does it do if you?
But you can get addicted to MDMA and LSD and psilocybin.
Psilocybin.
Those are both acting on serotonin, and so you don't build as many reward circuits with those.
My experience with alcohol was, again, happiness is chemical, and so it was like, hey, I have found a thing that when I drink it, I am happy.
Yeah.
It was literally joy in the bottle. It was the best thing, and then I didn't stop drinking for 3 years. So that was not a
unfortunate.
good thing. Yeah.
I would have much less of a fear of addiction for psychedelics than alcohol and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of what you see is really propaganda. Like there's heroin addicts that'll tell you it's harder to quit smoking than it is to quit heroin. So it's a lot of what you're saying isn't really an accurate representation of the risks of the drugs. It's something used to justify the enforcement of them.
And
I think.
Yeah, and another thing, you're probably familiar with this, Eneash, is the cultural message that once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. Right. You can't say, I used to be an alcoholic. You have to say, like, I'm a recovering alcoholic.
I can and I do say that I used to be an alcoholic. Yeah.
Right. And I have heard, and I'm sorry I didn't check on this, but I've heard that there are a number of studies that show that most people with alcoholism and maybe, I think, including other addictions, they stop on their own without any kind of treatment or program.
Yeah. And by most, I don't think it's like a large majority, but I have heard that more than half of the people who had a problem for a while eventually are just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And they stop.
You'll see that pretty quickly with LSD. That's one of the things that, I mean, really research should be opened up on these things. Just because to completely block it off is to say there's no therapeutic effects. And, you know, I mean, the community that does them is pretty solid that there's therapeutic effects.
So how do you feel about more of the drugs that are like just party drugs, like, I don't know, heroin and cocaine and such?
Before we get to that, I had a quick question. So we won't use Eneash as an example, but we can use somebody like Eneash as an example.
Okay.
Somebody who kind of struggled with like facing existential crisis and solipsism, you know, growing up. And Taryn, you used the phrase, it kind of forces you to face your I don't know what word
whatever you've bottled up.
So I'm imagining two different ways that this could go for somebody like that. They could either end up back in, oh my God, I'm in the Matrix, everything's fake, or they could end up having crushed that and be like, I can't believe that was ever a concern of mine.
Or it could just be a visual happy time.
That's it. But do you think it could go either way? Or do you think...
Yeah.
Didn't you say that you used to have some trouble too with reality testing?
Yeah.
And it didn't make it worse?
I think it didn't make it worse and it didn't make it better, but it made me more accepting that was a part of my life, and to just kind of have, I don't know, accept that was part of my life and not be really controlled as much by it.
Okay. Cool. Party drugs?
Yeah. How do you feel about the ones that are explicitly known as just party drugs, like
Yeah.
cocaine and I guess not heroin necessarily, but the morphine.
I definitely wouldn't call
Types.
cocaine just a party drug.
No,
It's a Wall
Yeah.
Street drug.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's an office drug.
Yeah.
what now?
You know,
Yeah.
like that joke about, or not joke, I don't know, that quip about
Yeah.
mommy's little helper like taking their kids Ritalin. It's cocaine's like the leveled up version of that. It's like R-rated Ritalin.
I thought the high from cocaine only lasts for like 5 minutes.
No, it lasts a few hours.
Huh. Okay.
But it is, I mean, you can use it at parties and stuff, but I wouldn't, I mean, going to a rave or whatever, like I wouldn't choose cocaine as my drug of choice, you know?
Are they, because those in specific, cocaine and heroin are the ones that you see the most in popular media as being the destroyers of lives.
Oh, heroin's pretty bad.
Okay, so
heroin's an opiate,
yeah.
and it's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
The real danger comes nowadays because it's again just a completely like black boxed thing where there's not research heroin or anything like that. Whenever people are buying heroin on the streets nowadays, it's not even heroin anymore, and it's cut with fentanyl. And so you're getting people that are buying heroin, and they're actually getting an even worse drug for it just because we don't have, regulated markets and stuff like that for these.
You were.
Oh, I was just gonna say like heroin and meth are ones you really
Meth's
don't want
pretty
to
crazy too.
get into.
So there are some limits on the drugs that you're willing to do.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
He's
I
giving
mean,
me this
to-
look like, yes, you dumbass.
I mean, it's you can't present it as all drugs are bad or all drugs are good. You have to understand that they're just be educated about what you're doing. Don't do stuff that the community at large doesn't have positive effects out of it. I mean, if you talk to people who have done LSD and stuff like that, there will be people who have had a bad experience, but the majority of them will say it's like one of the most influential positive experiences of their life, or like at least in the top most influential positive experiences in their life.
I worry about the bad trip too.
I think it's worthwhile for you to know, if you would ever consider doing LSD, to know about the possible bad things that could happen. To take into account the warning stories as well as the good things.
Because a bad trip can last for like hours of just terror, right? And
Yeah,
it might feel like
it could last
days
for
of
hours, and
terror.
that might feel like an eternity. But that's the whole point of spreading responsible use and stuff. I mean, it's about the environment that you keep in. If somebody just hands you LSD and you don't research like what's actually going to happen, and you just kind of throw yourself in a pool without knowing whether or not you can swim, it's going to be a bad time. But if you know kind of what influences the trip and stuff like that, I think you have a higher likelihood of it going well.
So what would you recommend for a good trip?
A good sitter, I would say.
Can you define?
Just somebody who's you love and you trust fully, who is going to be sober with you for that experience. I would say that would be the big one.
I will also say that I did hear some warning stories about how you have to be really careful about your environment so you don't have a bad trip, and I didn't find that really played into my experiences.
It also depends on like dosage and stuff. If
Yeah.
you take a hefty dose of LSD, then
Are you saying I should not take LSD and go to a Gwar concert?
yeah, probably not. Not yet. Maybe someday. But
right.
once you're a little bit more.
Once I'm hardcore into the horror scene.
But then you might as well just do heroin. So
Oh, well, shit.
One of my first psychedelic experiences was with someone I was dating who was about to leave, and it was like the last time that we were going to be together. And it should have been a total bummer to be like, I'm really sad and I'm taking drugs right now. And I was really sad, but I don't feel like that made it a bad trip or anything.
yeah.
What'd you take?
4-ACO, synthetic psilocybin.
Yeah, those are really good too. We don't know a lot about safety, but I mean, if you're just somebody who really fears meeting somebody in an alleyway, which you probably, I mean, if you're buying drugs out of an alleyway,
You're probably doing it wrong.
you're probably doing it wrong. Yeah.
Taryn's like, find yourself a corrupt pharmacologist. Are you guys at all worried about normalizing a culture of drug use? I don't know. So I agree that drugs should be legal, like every single drug. I don't make distinctions at the hard drugs. I think they should all be legal and people get to make their choices. But the whole talking about it and telling people how okay, you know, and life affirming or whatever it can be to have LSD, do you worry that maybe there would be more people that start taking like opiates and cocaine and things like that?
I think if we started talking about them responsibly, it would probably be less use.
Less use?
I would less irresponsible use. Okay. And that's really what's important. You know, you don't necessarily want there to be less use. You just want there to be less people who are just like going freaking nuts with this stuff. Yeah. And if there was an environment where you could have rational conversation about the pitfalls and the pros of these things, then I think the responsible use would definitely increase. I mean, it's all over Silicon Valley right now, you know, LSD, and that's because they talk about it in a responsible and real manner.
There's some good evidence that our American culture, with the drugs that are legal, particularly, you know, alcohol, the way that our culture talks about it makes it worse. And so I think that if people could like just calm down about drugs and don't talk about them in this overblown way, maybe people would have a healthier relationship and be more responsible, like in the way that people are in France, where they don't expect taking alcohol, you know, using a bit of alcohol to make you into some kind of raged drunk.
Yeah. You'll see like online communities and stuff like Irwid, where a lot of the focus is on safety and harm reduction, you know, because they talk about it openly. It's on the internet. Nobody's going to bust down their door. They're not all like, hey, man, you should do heroin because it's so good. You know, it's much more of a responsible discussion.
I also do wonder if maybe there could be some kind of assistance services for people doing drugs. Yeah. Even if it is like an abusive situation, drug abuse situation, like people would maybe still benefit from having professionals there with them.
Yeah, Portugal, they focus mainly on just harm reduction, and they don't criminalize it and tell people that, you know, they're the scum of the earth for doing whatever they're doing. And then whenever the person, they can talk to the police and say, hey, you know, like, I really feel like this is becoming a problem. Can you guys help me get help?
Have you heard of wet houses?
No.
An interesting concept. Apparently, most shelters for homeless people have very strong rules about no drugs or alcohol of any kind. And that keeps some people out of homeless shelters, and they'd rather just, you know, freeze on the street and have their alcohol. So there was one I heard about, God, I don't remember what podcast it was, probably Radiolab, but a shelter that's set up, and they had all sorts of issues with government regulations and getting money. But it was like, we will not give you any alcohol, but you can come here and drink all you want. And a lot of people loved it. And that was like, alcohol was a very big part of their lives. And it's kind of sad, but on the other hand, it's just someone like, I need alcohol. This is how I live my life. And they live their life. And it's not going to be a very long life in the long run, because they are slowly killing themselves. But I don't know. What can you do? I think it's almost better to allow them to have that sort of a place than to force them out and tell them, you know, you have to either be miserable or cold.
Yeah. And also you have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You know, like even if you did want help, it'd be a lot harder.
Right. At least at the wet house, you can turn to someone, or you can have friends.
There's somebody there that you can talk to that'll say, yeah, let's work on getting you some help.
Yeah.
Are there maybe some European countries or something that have more of these kinds of laws and procedures?
I don't know.
I mean, Portugal is completely decriminalized. I think most places that have huge drug problems, like gargantuan drug problems, they're going to start moving more towards decriminalization, just because like having a war on it and like forcing the market to be a black market, and just The war on drugs just doesn't work.
The drug cartels in Mexico have almost as much power as the government, more in certain places.
War on drugs, it just doesn't work.
Once your government loses the monopoly on violence, you got to do something.
I do anticipate that, like, if June 1st, there was like, all right, everyone, all drugs are legal now, that there would be a huge spike in usage initially.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that taper off after like 6 months.
It might be more than 6 months. I've heard that every culture in the world has about a 100-year period after they discovered alcohol where like nothing gets done. There's no new inventions.
But it's not like LSD being discovered in the United States. It's just that now you could get it at the pharmacy rather than having to find a drug dealer.
Yeah.
And so it's not like it's going to impede. I don't think it would impede society that much because it's not like it's not out there. It's just hard to find. The primary reason I haven't used any of these things yet is because I don't have a safe way to get it. If I could go to again, I don't know what you'd call it, the fancy pharmacy and get, whatever drugs I wanted. Like I can go to the liquor store and get alcohol or go to the dispensary and get marijuana. I would definitely have used most of these things by now, or at least a handful of them. I guess I'm not sure if I'm trying to make a stronger point or not, other than just anticipating that there'd be a spike. But also, I guess there's something to be said about being able to trust your source and having confidence that you're getting what you're thinking you're getting.
There's also like LSD is a journey for sure, or any psychedelic. It's a journey. It would wear you out. If to become addicted to it would wear you out. There's people that do it and they completely fry their brains with this stuff. But I mean, I think a lot of people would more skew towards the side that just uses it responsibly, like once every couple of years.
Let's talk briefly about the whole neurotoxicity thing, because I have felt for a long time like a bad rationalist because I do drink alcohol. not every day anymore, but sometimes.
I mean, even though there's a fair number of rationalists who don't, there's still more that do. So you're not a bad
suppose,
rationalist.
but like a big part of the whole rationalist community is really being into, I guess, for lack of a better term, like intelligence and our brains and being able to use them and fix things. And I feel like stabbing my brain with chemicals is a horrible thing for me to do. And when you first said that you didn't drink, I thought it was because of that reason, that you didn't want to like injure your brain at all.
I mean, partially.
Partially that too?
Yeah, but I don't think like the average alcohol user has long-term, like if you have a drink now and then, you're probably not going to have long-term injury from it, right?
Probably not, because most people drink. Even the really smart, even famously smart people do. But it still worries me. I'm like, what
looking at all of these things through the window of every single thing that's going to damage me, isn't the right. It's the. I
mean, do you ever worry like, what if I could be 2 IQ points smarter right now if my parents hadn't dropped me on my head when I was 2? Or
story of my life. Minus the head dropping. Minus being dropped. I've hit it my head like somewhere on the order of 100 times. And it does keep me up.
Do worry about that,
It
right?
doesn't keep me up at night, but it does make me bummed. But I don't feel
and
like
you drink, right? And you don't ever wonder like, maybe if I hadn't had the past 1,000 drinks over the last 10 years, I'd be at 1 point smarter.
Yeah, but that's like I said, it kind of took me away from that, where that was for a large portion of my life, what the purpose was to just go faster and faster and get smarter and smarter. And then the drugs, maybe they did take a few IQ points away, but they allowed me to kind of appreciate just everyday beauty and stuff like that. And my life experience has been better, even though maybe I'm not as smart or something like that,
You likely would have burned out a lot faster.
Well, maybe I would have not burned out at all, and I would have just continued to climb a ladder of success or whatever, but I wouldn't have appreciated, just like I said, the general beauty in existing quite as much if it wasn't for those. I would think maybe I would have eventually found it, but I think it was a lot quicker road for me.
I just want to mention that although it seems like the three of you probably look at intelligence as something very tied to achievement, I don't so much. Maybe partially because I don't feel a strong sense of reward from achievement or productivity in general. So, but I like intelligence for, I don't know, just for the enjoyment of understanding things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very cool too.
Yeah.
You don't find a sense of like achievement from doing things?
Not very much.
Where do you get that feeling from? Like in general in your life?
What do you mean? I mean, I don't feel much of a pleasure of achievement in general.
Okay. Where do you get like pleasure from then, I guess?
Understanding things and experiencing things that I think are aesthetically pleasing.
Okay.
Like primarily, I think that humans are, I mean, both ugly and beautiful inside, and I get a lot of enjoyment from delving into minds. But also, external reality. I don't know. I enjoy cool things.
Yeah.
Also, whenever you think about intelligence, a lot of people relate it to IQ. And, there's this whole separate thing, EQ, like that is just being able to emotionally connect with someone. And I think psychedelics and MDMA certainly contribute to those.
I don't know if I'm so up on the whole like IQ versus EQ thing. Maybe because I'm also low EQ.
Yeah. But you said maybe you'd lose a few IQ points, maybe you'd gain a few EQ.
I'm worried. I want to nip this before we get on a whole other topic of G factor, because that is an entire episode right there.
Yeah, it is.
We are at 50 minutes, so we should probably start steering towards wrapping up. Are there things that people wanted to mention that I didn't get to yet?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, same. So you go first.
Steven, we were kind of having a discussion recently where you were peer pressuring me into drinking.
You son of a bitch.
I explicitly said I wasn't peer pressuring you into drinking. What I was doing,
if you have to say, I'm not peer pressuring you, but...
So the conversation was, I think what I was trying to do was assuage some of your concerns about alcohol consumption, just like Enosh needs his concerns about LSD consumption assuaged.
All right.
So yes, it was there a better. Did you want me just to reiterate roughly what we were talking about, or did you want me to answer a specific question?
Well, yeah, you could do a summation, and then maybe we can touch on a few things.
Sure. I think what I tried to say was that I was trying to. I think many listeners will have had experience with alcohol, so they'll kind of get where I'm coming from. And it is difficult to articulate. The way I tried to hit it was like all the pleasant effects of being tired with none of like the exhausted effects. So like you're more relaxed. And this is at, I don't know, moderate imbibement or moderate consumption level, not, slurring your speech level. Well, I mean, just like with anything, you can go too far. So, I mean, after like 2 drinks for an average person, maybe you're slightly more relaxed, but it's especially like what I tried to say was after 1, I don't think you'd even really notice that it could have happened.
Oh, if you've never drank before, you'll notice it after 1.
Well, I mean, I guess 1 what? It depends. What I guess getting at those, I think.
Oh yeah, we were saying
the beginning effects of alcohol are so subtle that you might not even think that you took it as substance, right? You could have ordered an Irish coffee and not known that it was Irish coffee. You thought it was just creamer, and you might not notice that you're at all under the influence of alcohol. It's just like, oh, I feel kind of pretty relaxed. That's it's so I think the effects are pretty moderate with mild usage, and there's not a lot of like reality distortion or personality changes. What I try to describe is with me, I think, and this might be true or not, but my general experience with alcohol is people will be like, oh yeah, that person's a mean drunk, or that person cries when they get drunk. For me, I think it just amplifies whoever you actually are. And so
the barriers and the filters.
Yeah, a bit. I talk more when I'm drinking. But which yes might be a nightmare if I already talk too much.
As everyone mentally cringes.
This is him censoring himself. But I mean, there's one time where I was at a bar downtown and I stepped over this like fence thing to talk with somebody, and I went to go step back over, and the bouncer was like, "Hey, sorry, club rules. You have to go back around through the front, but I won't make you wait in line." And but he said it like all apologetically, like he probably is used to people giving him a hard time about it. And I remember this was at a point where I was way too drunk to drive, but I remember being just over the top understanding. I was like, oh no, man, I totally get it. It's your job. I'm sure some people are dicks about it. Don't worry. I'm not going to be an asshole about it, man. I totally understand. So I don't think you have to worry about like your underlying personality changing. I guess certainly not after. Like Enosh said, the day after, assuming you're not hungover, you're going to be just like you were the morning before. And during that time, you might be able to just generalize by looking at drunk people. Right.
Well,
I think the idea that your personality doesn't change is completely bunk. You could do steroids and you don't get you don't perceive reality different. at all. But over time, your personality certainly changes.
I didn't mean to say that drugs never change your personality. I meant specifically getting drunk one night wouldn't change your personality.
Yeah, not one night it wouldn't change you drastically, but over time,
Oh yeah, I mean just like yeah, especially if you're doing it too much.
yeah, especially if you're doing it too much.
Yeah, I certainly hope I wasn't interpreted saying that I didn't think that was the case.
When you talk about being like more uninhibited and less filtered, I do feel like for me, like I strongly identify with those parts of my brain, which are the inhibitions and the filters. So that would be like a different me.
That's fair. I think
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
A lot of it is pretending. And I think I have
Yeah.
mentioned this to you already,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. The first time I started to fall out of love with alcohol was when I woke up the day after a lot of drinking and was still drunk in the morning, and I had to go to work. And I was like, well, I'm just going to pretend to be sober. And it worked. And I noticed after that, if I was having a drink, I would have to pretend to be drunk to really get as much out of it as I used to. And if I pretended to be sober, I'm like, I'm a little dizzy, but I'm not any happier.
you kind of broke the spell when you noticed that.
It really broke the spell, and it was really disappointing after that.
A large part of it is
was my
the social.
first step on the quitting.
Yeah, I think a large part of it is social.
So you can stay just as inhibited if you really want to.
Yay.
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly. It gives you an excuse.
Yes, more than anything else, it's you have social license when you're drunk to cry if you're a man, or to say the things you really want to say, and people are like, he's drunk, it's okay.
Sure.
I think the social license more than anything else is the big benefit of alcohol.
Yeah, maybe like social lubricant is the right word, and not like social like force. Like it doesn't make you different; it just gives you a license to be different. And so part of it does come from everyone the social culture of it. There's a fun, I'm sure we could find it on YouTube, a video of this a video summary of this study that I saw where basically they had a bar that they served all fake drinks, and people were like, "Oh my god, I'm so wasted," and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if those people had drunk before. I'd have to check again, because I think you would know whether or not, after some level, whether or not you're actually getting drunk. But again, after a couple drinks, that's what I'm saying, is that the effect is so subtle that you might not even notice that it's happening, or you could trick yourself into thinking it's happening when it's not. So
Yeah. When you said that you get the pleasant effects of being tired, does it vary with what alcohol you're drinking?
I couldn't, and to be clear, I can't really think of a better way to put it other than that.
Because I get that with beer and somewhat with wine, but never with hard liquors. Those tend to like give me more energy, and maybe it's just because how much sugar is in them.
I think so. Like I said, it's not even like being tired. I think like it's like tiredness without the exhaustion. Okay. It's tiredness minus the tiredness. It's
It's just mellowness, right?
it's mellowness. It's ease. But you can have that with differing amounts of energy, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I've noticed the way that I'm trying to communicate it and failing, that I've noticed that changing depending on what I drink.
It may also be because I generally nowadays drink socially, and I pull a lot of energy out of having other people around me. So
Right.
maybe it comes from that too.
Yeah, same. I can see that.
And what you're describing sounds to me like a nice cuddle, and I'd rather just do some cuddling than
Oh yeah. No, do whatever you want to do. I think what I was trying to do was explain to you that I didn't think it was as
But what if you're at a family reunion and you can't cuddle anyone because it'd be weird?
But I also don't want to be in that mellow space when I'm at a family reunion.
Got to watch your back around those assholes.
I think that just like there's understandable trepidations about someone's first time using using THC or psilocybin. I feel like some of those concerns are definitely worth concerning yourself with, and others aren't. I think what I was trying to communicate was I felt like some of the things that you were worried about weren't worth being concerned about. But I mean, obviously, like certainly do whatever you want. If you want to get drunk sometime, we totally can, but there's no pressure. If I think, like, I mean, I certainly was persuaded by, like I mentioned, I came off the fence on where I stood on drugs after reading an essay several years ago, but definitely talking to the two of you put me over, and
Oh no.
at the sense of sounding like I'm incriminating
Right,
myself.
you guys are pushers.
Well, I mean, I'd have to go back and find it. There was a phrase that you used that I've heard in other contexts of like, you can kind of just, what was it, like shuffle or like reshuffle your outlook or something, or some, there was some, that wasn't it. There was some better way of putting that I'm like, that sounds exactly like what I need. So, I'm kind of sold, but obviously, like, I wouldn't frown on anybody who wasn't persuaded by that. Or they're like, you know what, I'm happy where I am, or I don't want to shake that box or whatever, right? So,
Well, it forces you to see things from a different perspective.
yeah.
Is that what you were?
Yeah, something like that, which I'm totally down with. I mean,
I like seeing things from different perspectives. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not ready yet to be changed. I don't think.
I'm not necessarily convinced that there's a long-term change that is drastic. I'm sure that maybe it's a percentage of people.
Yeah. There
True. Like
is certainly
Shelley
people
apparently
that
have
there
no
is drastic long-term changes, but I think most people,
Do you think that your underlying disposition, like you're the kind of person who would be easily rattled by something else, like, you know, a near lethal car crash would also change them for life or something?
yeah,
So,
everything that you do, not everything, I guess, but yeah, everything you do changes your conscious experience. You know, it changes your state of consciousness, whether it's like viewing a piece of art that makes you feel sad, or like, you know, watching a movie where you're excited. It all changes your conscious experience. I think drugs are just an extension of that. It can force you into a different conscious state.
That's sort of like, I mean, the example that keeps running through my head when we're talking about, like, because drugs, I think, is way too fuzzy of a word.
Yeah.
If it covers everything from the tea in your morning, or the caffeine in your morning tea to
Sex.
yeah, or to
Everything.
if it covers from tea to meth, that's way too far, right? But like somewhere on that spectrum probably is something like skydiving, right?
Yeah.
And that gives you an adrenaline rush, brain rush. You probably come down, have a great day afterwards. Might change your life afterwards.
I would
But you didn't-
totally
you didn't
consider
take
skydiving
anything.
a drug,
See, I
yeah.
would yeah. And I thought you were gonna say you consider skydiving for real, and I never would. Falling from heights is. I think that's one of the things that we're programmed to not like for a good reason.
Yeah, we
So-
didn't naturally fall from upper atmosphere very much.
But have you not been on roller coasters?
I hate roller coasters.
Oh, really?
I don't even like. I'm not a huge fan of not driving when I'm in a car.
Oh.
I mean, I can totally get by, but like I don't like flying in a plane for the same reason.
Oh, see, I like both flying and roller
Oh
coasters.
God, I take drugs to fly. I take Xanax to fly, even though like it's interesting. This is an aside,
love to
but
skydive
my
someday.
my brain knows that like I'm way more likely to die on the way to the airport than I am after I get on the plane. But just, I mean, everything with turbulence, you can look out and you can see the wings shaking when you're flying, and I'm like, well, we're definitely gonna die. There's nothing I can do. Like even if I'm in the car, like if the driver starts having a seizure, at least I can reach over and grab the wheel or pull the e-brake or something. But in the plane, I'm like, well, sure hope he's not drunk up there. Like,
You just got to time it so you jump right before the
Yep.
airplane hits the ground.
Wow.
so
Do you like adrenaline from other sources, like, I don't know, movies?
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
love.
specifically the falling.
I guess it might be related to falling. I think it's also just. I mean, that might actually be it. There's the sweeping sensation in your stomach. I went on a roller coaster once to make sure I didn't like them, to confirm my suspicion that I wouldn't, and I definitely didn't.
Good job doing science.
Yeah.
I went on the Mind Eraser.
Nice.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure it was great. But
I also don't like those situations, but I'm not scared of them. I just find going on roller coasters irritating. Like, why am I here? This is just physically a little bit uncomfortable, and there's wind in my face, and this is
Not being productive at all right now.
it's been close to 10 years since I tried a roller coaster. Maybe I could try again. I've changed a bit in the last 10 years. I feel like my outlook could be more like yours, where it's just like, you know, especially like if you're being more mindful of it rather than like letting yourself get freaked out.
Yeah.
Which I feel like it might be part of the ability to handle a good drug
You got to
experience
do
as well.
take a lot of drugs in the parking lot, then go for the roller coaster.
Don't do that.
But I think just being able to check on like what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. And then, you know, I mean, even like the last time I flew was 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember that was easier than the times I flew as a teenager because I was able to like actually force myself to not even sit there and do the numbers, but just know that the numbers were there and like internalize that on an emotional level. It didn't completely get rid of the fear, but it helped a bit. That's sort of unrelated. But I wonder if there's anything like that with controlling anticipations on a drug trip. Is there anything like that? I'm anticipating that there might be, but I have no.
I mean, yeah,
real
I've
experience.
had a bad trip before where I was able to, I kind of got into that timeless state. I was in and out of a timeless state, and it was going pretty badly. And I was able to say, all right, even though this feels like this is how I've always been and how I always will be, I can say that, you know, I did remember that I took drugs and that the likelihood is that this won't be eternity, you know?
Cool. I mean, that's reassuring, and I would hope to have the presence of mind if I ever found myself sliding.
But you can go over that limit,
sure.
and once you go over, that's when really bad stuff happens. A lot of the really bad stuff you hear about, LSD is probably people that took a little bit too much, I think.
Probably like with every drug, like
Yeah,
alcohol, same
yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
No one had their life ruined because they had a beer at a dinner,
Yeah.
right? But when they stopped at 15, then that's when they're like, oh yeah, then they
Peed
they
on
threw
their
up so
boss or
much they went to the
whatever, yeah.
hospital. Yeah, exactly, all that stuff. So
I think you had something that you wanted to bring up before we move on.
it was the skydiving thing.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
I managed to shove it in. Like, well, I do feel like that.
We still doing phrasing?
There's directing your consciousness and your perceptions of it is the kind of thing that you can do with or without drugs. We talked about meditation. We talked about skydiving.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's sort of what, to me, just sort of illustrates the absurdity of making it illegal to do that in certain ways. I guess they need to very well articulate what their reasons are, and they haven't.
Well, it's because, they did.
Well,
Nixon was like, oh, it was to control
The counterculture.
countercultures and stuff like that.
guess
they've
I-
admitted their reasons. They just forgot that they admitted it, and now they're
I would have to agree with their reasons, I guess, to be
Yeah.
moved by that argument, right? So
the reason wasn't for public safety. That's not the reason, and that's the problem.
He said, what was it? We cannot illegalize being a hippie,
Yeah.
but we can illegalize marijuana.
Yeah,
Or something along
And
those
there are
lines.
some other, I think, ex-FBI people have said things about like targeting Latino and Black communities and about other drugs
Yeah.
as well. So
It's
Yeah.
if you're suburban, well-paid white mother, you're not going to get as much scrutiny for your drug use as if you're an inner city Black teenager, and that's just very unfortunately how the drug war has made things.
that reminds me of something I wanted to ask about. When we mentioned, like you said, some people can get addicted to LSD and stuff, but I
I
imagine
don't think they can get addicted, but
they
there's
can-
people that make habits out of it.
habitual. Sure, I would imagine though that those habits are harder to sustain than other addiction/drug habits, because you can't get through a workday if you're on LSD. Where I guess depending on what you do, but you can if you're had 3 drinks at lunch, you could probably get through the second half of the day. And most people might not notice, right?
Yeah.
You think people would notice if you've had 3 drinks at lunch?
Depends what you do. I
Okay.
guess. Well, so I mean, maybe that wasn't the best example. What I was getting at though is that, like, if say you go home and get drunk every night, but you can't go home and, unless maybe I'm wrong, take LSD every night and not have it really not
No, you
carry over to
cannot.
your work life.
No, it's like I said, it's a journey. It's something that you take, you learn a lot from. There's a lot to reflect on at the end of it. It's exhausting mentally in a way. I think it would be very hard for someone to
I
sustain a
would
drug
recommend
habit.
a Reddit post by someone who's rationalist adjacent. I don't know her real name. I think her handle is like Ayala Girl. She has been, or maybe still is, a sex worker. She does cam work, and she was living in a house with other cam stars, and she did acid every day for 4 weeks.
Well, if your job isn't,
I remember reading this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. So if you guys can show it, send it my way sometime. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds like the kind of job where you could handle that though.
Yeah.
Where like you're not commuting to and from work.
Right.
You're not. Your coworkers understand if you're not super coherent. So that might be atypical.
It was really fascinating though when she stopped doing that. Oh God, what was her reason? Like it was a whole different world that she felt she was in, right?
Yeah. It sounded like it really did have some very permanent effects in her way of thinking. Yeah. It's been a while since I read it, but I would recommend finding the link and reading it.
We'll put it up on
I
our
think
blog
even,
post.
even one use is going to give you a pretty permanent effect, I think, in your way of thinking. But it's usually more positive rather than
As I
negative.
recall, didn't she say something about how she felt like she could just stop living at any time? And
Yes.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't matter because
Yeah.
like the entire universe. I think one of her major difficulties afterwards, after she stopped using it, is that now she's now a single small person again, and she's not like this expansive being that takes up all of the cosmos, and being shunted down into a small little meat suit again was just very hard to do, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. It was very, and
And like, it didn't matter if you died
Yeah.
because the entire rest of the cosmos goes
Yeah.
on. There's just that one little piece of you that happens to wink out, and what's the big deal?
I mean, I think accepting death is something that would help a lot of people.
Nope. Get the hell out. You're no longer welcome here.
And she did talk about how it was extremely stressful, but she felt like she was opening her eyes to something important, and she just wanted to know, even as much as it was painful and stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really good post.
Well, I'm curious. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. It's been a number of years. I may be remembering the details wrong, but it was fascinating.
Did we hammer down? Did we have a sufficient response to like the James Randian skeptic type who didn't want their perception altered at all? Did we ever drive home a solid argument against that?
Dude, I don't know. If you don't want your perception altered, don't do drugs.
Oh no, but I guess what I'm wondering is they might say something like, I'm not sure if Randy would or not, but someone like that might say, if you're using drugs, you can't be claiming that you're perceiving reality appropriately.
Would they go so far as to claim that?
I think I would say that you're always doing drugs. You know, your reality is shaped by your stimulus, and
Yeah, like if you exercised or did not that
Yeah.
day, or if you ate a certain meal that day, it all affects your brain chemistry.
yeah. The problem with them is they're always in the perception that this specific way of altering consciousness is wrong. Is wrong. Yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
better not fall in love, because that's a very extreme.
Yeah, that's-
God. Yeah.
Fear and love are the two
Yeah.
most powerful drugs that humans can experience. you
And
know?
what do you do with people who have synesthesia and like see music? That's
They're fucked.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
That would be, to me, that feels like a counterexample of, look, these people are literally perceiving things in quote unquote incorrectly, and yet they're managing to live their lives just fine.
everybody perceives stuff incorrectly constantly. That's the nature of what we are. Like if you, an easy example is if you put a straw in water, you know, you see the straw bend even though it's not bent. That's just because perceptions aren't there to give us an accurate representation of reality. They're there to help us survive, you know, and there's some things that didn't really need to evolve in. We didn't need to evolve to be able to see things straight underwater.
And we can perhaps reduce our biases, but we'll never completely overcome them.
Yeah, because they're part of being human.
And maybe using a drug like that will help you to realize that no matter how hard we try to overcome everything, there'll always be some little thing that you're missing and that's screwing up your perception. So don't get too arrogant and don't get too sure that you have everything figured out.
I think that's when I really got into heuristics and biases, was whenever I started doing drugs, just because it kind of forced me to see, whoa, you know, my perceptions can be wrong. What other perceptions that I'm commonly assuming are correct are actually wrong. So that really fueled that whole journey.
Fascinating. Isn't that how I would have thought people would have gotten into rationality? Took drugs and became a rationalist.
My takeaway from today is that I probably will continue doing psychedelics. I have not been convinced to try alcohol or cannabis. I do think that it's a good thing to at least consider what you want to do and why. Yeah.
I think to agree with you that I think my understanding, and I'll know more later, that or I'll be able to speak more to this personally later, is that I feel like if you go through your entire life without ever trying any hallucinogen whatsoever, you've probably missed out on something that
Definitely.
would be regrettable to miss out on. I don't feel like that's the case with alcohol. Alcohol is
okay.
just to make talking to people slightly
Yeah.
less terrible.
It can make talking to people a lot less terrible. I mean, before alcohol, I had severe social issues.
It can also make talking to people a lot more terrible, though,
Yeah.
at the same time.
Depends on the people. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
very much depends on
I was at a dinner thing, or I guess a party a couple weeks ago, and there's this guy who just all of his sensors were off, and turns out he needs those sensors. Really bad. So, yeah, it depends. But yeah, I don't think you're missing out on anything really important. I was just trying to make it trying to dissolve some of any anxieties or trepidations around it. But yeah, you're not. I don't think you're missing out on anything that.
With
I don't think my life
cannabis
would-
and alcohol, no.
I don't think my life would be
almost
worse if I
feel
never tried
the
alcohol.
opposite way. Like maybe this is because of how much alcohol has affected my life in that period. But like I think the experience of alcohol is partly interesting and something to be tried at least once for its own sake, but also just so you can know what everybody else in the entire world is done and talking about. Whereas like hallucinogens, I'm still not sure I ever want to try that. I'm like, I like who I am right now, more or less. Not enough to murder me yet, anyway. Give it another year.
Right on.
Yeah.
Are we okay going on to listener feedback?
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Let's just go. Do you have anything that you want to jump on?
I'll skim. If you've got a list, you go right ahead.
Sure. Okay, this is on the lying episode, so very pertinent to having Shelley here. Leibniz Integral Kex says, I think lying really quickly gets into gray areas when you get into deceptions that are not explicitly lies. What if I have to pretend not to be uncomfortable in a social interaction in order not to lose status, for example? I deceive you about my emotion and there is no real moral reason for or against it. Same goes for other social deceptions that are not technically lies. What if I know that having my chocolate bars lying around would cause people to ask for a piece and I don't want to give them, and I don't want that, so I put them away in a drawer. It's definitely deception, but it can't harm anybody.
I don't agree that that's deception in any meaningful way.
No?
I mean, if they'd asked, do you have any chocolate, and you said no, that's deception. I mean, but not having it out is different. Like that's like we talked about. We gave examples of asking about. Whatever, how much money do you make was the example we used. That kind of sucks, but whatever it is that you don't want to talk about, there's a difference between like carrying putting a badge on your sleeve that had like a personal bio, like that included your like IQ, bank statement, your all the stuff that people don't like talking about, your religion, your politics, or whatever. And like, so not having that card on your forehead all the time doesn't mean that you're lying, right?
Oh, well, there is a spectrum between like hiding information and then like a deceptive hiding of information because they're going to assume something different, right?
I think maybe if you're having chocolate bars lying around at the office or in your house, it's kind of implied that they're there for other people. It's okay to take.
Yeah, signaling all these kinds of hidden messages, maybe not so hidden, unspoken messages, they really kind of play into deception, I think, in a gray area. And the social example that the person used, I thought that was often very clear deception where you're like smiling, hugging someone, and you deep down you're like, I hate you.
Isn't that like where a lot of the drama of the typical housewives of New Jersey or whatever comes from? Yeah. It's like, I love you, you backstabbing bitch.
I mean, even if you don't say I love you, like you can act as though you like someone when you really don't.
Yeah. You could just go up to them and just be, hey, you're a shit person.
You don't even
hopefully
have to go that far.
Help them change. No, I don't think that would be the correct way to help somebody not be a crappy person.
What if you don't like your boss, though?
I think your boss falls into one of those power
power dynamics
that we talked about, where you sometimes you can't be perfectly honest with somebody who has a lot of power over you, right? So if you laugh at your boss's jokes even though they suck or something, right? Yeah. That's really funny. That's not funny at all. I feel worse for having heard your joke, but I have to say it was good. So that's dishonest and that's textbook lying. But I think that's kind of one of the situations where you understand it, because if you're radically honest with your boss, unless you get along with them really well, you don't have a job anymore. A lot of people need jobs. So
I guess it is still deception, but a kind that is sometimes unfortunately necessary.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell when it's more deceptive or less, right? It's really hard. It is a gray area. I agree with that person.
I really don't like my sister very much, but lately my mom has made an effort to get the family back together, and so I am nice when she is around. Like, hey, it's great to see you here at Mom's place. How fun to be talking with you. And yeah.
I can relate.
This is reminding me of when I interacted with my grandmother before she died, and she had really a lot of dementia. And people really avoided telling her a lot of things, or like would just play along with her.
I think there's a special exception to when someone actually has mental problems, though, like dementia. That is like being kind to them and considerate, because that is terrible.
Well, that's actually, I think that's what they teach in schools of people who work with this population. That, I mean, I'm waiting for FDR to come on the news. You do that, Nancy. Like, I mean, you don't say he's been dead for 30 years. Like, you don't rattle their world, because their cage doesn't need rattling. Even if they're going to forget it in 5 minutes, you just don't make things worse. You don't rock the boat. So you kind of just but in that you're not dialoguing with like rational agents, right? You're not. I mean, there's not. I think that's not a sense in which that level of dishonesty could be considered a bad thing.
I guess there's a lot to be said to being able to get along with people socially, even if you don't like them. And I don't know, where do you draw the line between being one of those backstabbing new housewives and being someone who is like, I want my workplace not to be a tense, horrible place, so I will act okay.
I get along with people I don't like, and then I just don't.
I do too,
I
usually.
don't invite them out to Saturday night drinks or something, or maybe once every 6 months, just to keep the work, but whatever it takes to keep the workplace amicable. But you don't, like you mentioned the I'm not sure what you're talking about, the New Jersey Housewives. I'm sure it's some TV show. I've heard that like the Housewives of something or other.
I haven't actually seen any of them, but I've seen like memes and clips.
So, but there's a difference, I think, between like inviting them over every week and like acting like your best friends but secretly hating them versus just like being nice, right?
I have a really, it was so weird and uncomfortable. At my last job, there was a coworker who every now and then, like he'd be hanging out my cube for some reason, and like a hot young intern or something would walk by, and after she'd go, he's like, man, I'd tap that ass. And I was like, and I wasn't sure if like, should I play along to keep things pleasant, or should I be like, you sir are a bad man? And it was the most uncomfortable thing. I didn't know what to do about that. And I feel really bad about myself because I basically just didn't say anything. I let it pass, and I feel like maybe I should have said something.
Well, I mean, you got to like weigh the risks to yourself, right?
I mean, he was a coworker, not a boss. He didn't have any.
But I mean, like if work life started getting worse for you because this guy knew that you thought he was a scumbag, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it also depends like how far, like if he's making this person uncomfortable, that's
Right.
maybe that's time to step in. But if he's just saying stupid things to you, no one's being harmed other than you for having had her hear it. So it's up to you. Do you want to escalate?
I probably should have said something just that he wouldn't have done it again, because it happened like 2 or 3 times.
Oh, he wouldn't have done it again to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which would have been fine. Yeah. As long as he didn't do it again to, anyone that was the object of that.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a fun one. Sailor Vulcan says, I would like to point out that there is a factual/logical error made in this episode. Atheism is not a religion, any more than theism is.
I think we both kind of tried to be clear that we don't think that it's a religion, but it's a religious alignment. Is that the term you used?
That is the term we used. The reply right after that was someone said that, and Sailor Vulcan replied with, yeah, I kind of think that's a bullshit term they just made up on the spot so that they could dodge things.
Why not make up a term like that? I think it's a useful term to make up.
Words and terms have to come from somewhere.
Yeah. I honestly really personally feel that it is basically a religious viewpoint. I have an opinion about religions, and it makes a difference in how I live my life, and I think it should be protected as much as any other religion is by the government.
But that's only in the context of structural power imbalances, or privilege by imbalances reflecting different belief sets, right? I mean, you don't think that like epistemologically they're anything like the same stance or even on the same sport.
I kind of do.
Really?
I mean, not in the way that atheism makes you believe anything, but I have a very strong belief in that the material world is all that there is, and there is no magic or.
Well, some people would say that you need an extra term, right, beyond atheism to describe that, and then that thing should be the thing.
Yeah, but I think the generic atheism should work as a decent protector for that. If, like, maybe you can use some other term, and that's fine too, but the strong secularist, maybe? No, that's not right, because secular just means keeping things separate.
I believe that, like, humanism as a formal system maybe includes some of these ideas. I'm not sure. Haven't looked that much into humanism.
I do think that the rejection of all supernatural claims, like the strong rejection, should count as some sort of a religious belief, and that is what I have. I strongly believe that all that is bullshit, and that people who believe it are deluded.
As far as like legality, that's what you're.
Both in legality and in like social consideration. I know there are like some people who call themselves apatheists who are like, I don't know, man, and I don't care. I'm just getting along. And sure, they don't have any religious belief, but I feel like my belief is definitely borderline religious. In
Nihilism,
that term.
Maybe. Are those people?
Damn you to hell! I am no nihilist.
No,
sir.
not you. I'm saying those people. Who,
those other people.
Oh yeah,
okay.
I'm an atheist. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in anything. That's nihilism.
Okay. Sorry, I take it back.
think
You are
there's-
still welcome here.
I think I still sort of disagree with where you're coming from, but I don't know if it's worth beating on too much. But it's like if Taryn thought that unicorns' coats were white, and you thought, and Shelley thought that they were off pink, and I was like, I don't think unicorns exist. I don't think those are three equal beliefs in any way, right?
No, yours is a much better belief because it's grounded in reality.
But then to say that, yeah, that's a stance. I guess how does that map on to like either having different beliefs about religion or saying I don't believe in this religion?
Do you not believe in unicorns because they're mythical, magical creatures?
I believe in them because I don't think they exist. Or excuse me, I don't believe in them because I don't think they exist.
I think that the problem here is that you didn't have a word for what atheism is, and religious alignment,
Yeah.
which is what you guys came up with, fills that void of explaining the idea without mixing up definitions with other things.
Fair enough.
And as far as like politically relevant, it's in the same playing field. Like your beliefs
Definitely.
Yeah,
about
it's still just
yeah.
the same as far as legality.
Yeah, in terms of political legality, definitely.
Well,
This
that-
may not matter as much in other countries, but in the U.S., where there is a very specific and strong exemption for religious
Yes.
beliefs, having that sort of anti-religious belief to be counted is an important legal thing.
And that I can get more on board with. In fact, this is actually a lie I told on a formal piece of paper. I don't know if it's a lie, but I should have mentioned this during the lying episode. When you sign up for cryonics, one of the documents that they send you, if you want to sign it, is a religious exemption from autopsy. Because if you're autopsied, you can't be cryopreserved. And I said, yeah, but there's no formal document that says I have a secular objection to autopsy. So I signed the one that said I had a religious objection to autopsy, even though I don't. But that was only because there wasn't
Right.
a comparable way to get that benefit, right? So
I signed the same thing because, I'm also signed up for cryo, and I did not feel like I was lying when I signed it. I was like, this feels sort of like a religious-ish belief. I mean, yes, it's grounded entirely on science, but I'm hoping that this technology comes about in the future. And I love that at one point Eliezer said, you know what? I got sick and tired of explaining to people what this cryo tag that I keep around my neck is, in case you die out in the public somewhere and the EMTs come, it says, please call this number and have them, take care of my body in this specific way. So I just started telling people that this is part of my religion. I believe if I'm wearing this when I die, I will get an afterlife.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was like, fuck yeah. No, I have once previously, and I wrote this when I was drunk during that drunk period, but I still kind of stand by it. I said that I feel like some of the people in the rationalist community, the leaders, almost feel like my priests to me. They are the people that are doing the good work that I want to see done in the world, and I am more than happy to help contribute to that.
I'm cringing a little bit
Yeah.
from that language. But
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I feel like your perspective though makes a lot of sense, especially from where you're coming from, right? Like that's the context. That's like the whole framework that you built your childhood model of reality around.
Yeah.
And so if you're like,
I have strong emotional roots there.
yeah, so like I mean, if you're supplanting, Yahweh with the lesser wrong sequences,
Matter.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think like as long as you know that they're not the exact same thing, and it sounds like you're not completely just like, nope, I've switched out this religion for this
Yeah.
this blind acceptance of other beliefs.
Right.
I feel like that's totally fine. I do feel like the language would annoy a lot of people, but I totally get where you're coming from.
I'm sure I just pissed off like 90% of our listeners.
And I do think that it's dangerous to venerate someone so much that you would just accept anything.
I would not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
There've been at least a few situations where I was like, oh God. But like if it came out that someone high up in the rationalist community was abusing children or something, I'd be like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah.
Throw them in jail.
But also,
Because-
like, just on factual or logical philosophical disagreements, like, even though I think someone is really smart, I still am likely to disagree with them about some of those things.
Yeah.
So,
You're in
Yeah.
any decent religion, I should hope, you'd be allowed to disagree with your priests
Yeah.
all day long.
Yeah.
If you can't disagree with your priest, get out of that fucking religion.
I feel like we're not using the word religion in the same way.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're the only one using it
I'm
wrong.
sorry. I'm completely fine. I should
Well, no,
just
it's-
bow out because I'm doing things wrong right
I give you a
now.
hard
Sorry.
time.
it's such a vague word.
Science is a religion. Everything.
Oh, you're cruising for a
Ooh.
bruising.
Yeah. I don't know
Everything
about that, man.
breaks down to like philosophy on the back end, and somewhere there's a belief. you know.
Yeah, but science is a method of exploring the world. I would not consider science my religion in any way. I have very much broader and deeper than just science. Where science is like a tool.
Where do your Bayesian priors come from?
No one knows where priors come from.
That's part of the Matrix. Should we go on?
Yeah.
I'm down to keep going.
Okay.
What else?
I'm sure we'll probably get more mail about this thing that I was just saying. Oh, this one is just kind of a fun one. I'm not sure there's a lot to reply to it, but Googleplex Byte says, why is the sky is blue used as a proxy for absolute truth so much?
Yeah, I always try to avoid that one because it's color and skies can be different colors. And gosh, that's a bad one. We shouldn't use sky as blue as
it varies a lot.
Now I agree, but my inner devil's advocate is going to just find a way to argue this. So I'll defend it in that I think it's popular because you could imagine in the context of having this argument, like say 3 people are sitting outside and the sky is currently blue, and they use that as a claim, like, okay, well you're saying this, but how can we relate that to a statement like they all look up and point, the sky is blue or grass is green? Now, granted, grass can be different colors, the sky can be different colors at sunset, or there can be clouds. Grass can be, brown. It can be
yellow.
Whatever color. It can be painted white, like on a football field. Those don't change like what you're getting at. I think sky is blue is the default. It's like saying this table is flat, or this table has 4 legs.
I always like to use number of fingers because I can see it, and if you can't see, you can feel my hand, right? Like if you have things that prevent you from perceiving what I perceive, there are other methods for you to tell that I have 5 fingers.
I've heard that the sky being blue is a bit of a social construct too, that if you ask children who have never been told that the sky is blue, like what color is the sky, they kind of look at you kind of confused. Like, I don't know. It's not a thing. It doesn't have a color. It's just stuff that's up there.
Yeah, it's not blue.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is that the sky is absent.
Can I steal that fingers
blueness
thing?
out there often.
You see
I'm going to
blue,
use
but
the
it's
fingers
not
thing from now on.
blue.
I won't use the blue sky anymore. I like that a lot because, like you said, it's independently verifiable from various ways of interacting with it.
Right. And
Boom.
like if you're colorblind, you can't verify the sky is blue on your own, right?
I mean, yeah, you probably could. There's probably
you'd
ways
have
to
to
verify
you'd have
like
to get
atmospheric.
instruments.
Yeah.
You'd have to use tools, but with my hand, you can almost anyone can feel my 5 fingers on some part of their body.
As long as they have a body. Have not yet reached our post-human future.
Yeah.
I love that he ended saying this little rant about the sky with, your very foundation for truth is a lie, a fiction drilled into your head by society. How can anyone be honest when they are surrounded by people living in their own fantasy? So that was awesome.
I like it.
Our perceptions don't give us accurate representations of reality. That's not what they're there for.
Googleplex Byte also asked, is camouflage a lie?
What
I don't like that
mean by
question.
that? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I feel like that's an example of a bad question. Can you point to an instance of camouflage and tell you if it's lying? Like, is a stick insect lying about being a stick? Like, I think it's just, or lying about being an insect. It's pretending to be a stick, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's not doing anything. It's just being a stick insect.
I kind of feel like there has to be a intent to.
Deceive.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it does kind of want to deceive predators into thinking it's a stick.
I think I'll try and find this clip. If you haven't seen Community, I'd recommend watching it. Chevy Chase's character plays this sort of like crotchety, insane old man, and they're having this conversation in the library about how he's like kind of crazy and paranoid, and then he busts out from behind this fake. He had like this cardboard bookshelf that he's standing next to the bookshelf with, and he throws it down, and he's like, crazy, paranoid, impotent, what are you guys saying? But so like he was lying about not being there with that bookshelf because he wanted to spy on them, but it was just really funny because he confirmed that he was crazy and paranoid by being there already with that thing. I think that was being deceitful. I don't know if that question's worth. I think it's an example of a poorly phrased question.
Yeah, maybe. I think we're just trying to, at this point, argue like about definitions. Like maybe lying implies that you have a specific target that you're trying to deceive.
This reminds me of something I wish I had brought up in the lying episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about how I wouldn't want there to become impossible to lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, like, there are ways that you could make it impossible for me to kill you that wouldn't infringe on my autonomy. Like, if you were invulnerable to being killed, then that you wouldn't have to do something to me to create that state.
That's true.
But to make it impossible for me to lie to you, you would have to know, you'd have to at least read my mind to know if I was lying and then, signal it somehow.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, definitely the taking away lying thing would infringe people's autonomy because you're taking something away rather than giving something, right? It's not like you're giving them the power to tell the truth. They already have that.
Well, I think it's almost seems more along the lines of you'd have to invade your personal mental privacy.
Yeah.
Because at this point, we're not talking about like fantasy, God makes it so no one can lie, more like specific technology to make lying impossible.
Yeah.
But,
I did say during that episode that I didn't feel like this idea was hashed out enough for me to actually want to defend it that much. But I'm happy to keep talking about it. But just wanted to put that out there that this is not something that I sincerely believe.
All right.
I agree. I still hold that if there was like some kind of magical God makes it so that it's impossible to lie sort of thing, that it would be good. But for there to be a technology that reads mental states, probably way too invasive.
I don't want magical God reading my mental states either, but I guess maybe that's included in the definition.
Yeah, like he wouldn't be reading your mind. He would just be like, you try to lie, and it's like, oh, did you ever see Liar Liar with Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so much fun. He just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't try the obvious thing. Although, I think I saw this when it was relatively new. I was a really little kid. And I was like, oh my God, he could just answer any question. Like that you might not know, but then his answer would have to be if he didn't know, say how far it was from here to the moon.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know.
Exactly, the answer is I don't know, and not the correct answer.
Yeah.
I when I first saw that, my first thought was like, oh my God, he could be like just a fact machine that.
Dude, you were a munchkin at that young.
Well, but it did. I mean, it defeated itself in 5 seconds after thinking about it. But that was one of my first thoughts. That like, oh my God, what if he could just abuse this and or like
awesome.
he could go to the casino and be like, I have a winning hand, and he could try and like mumble that under his breath, and if he couldn't say it, then he would know not to bet. But again, he wouldn't know. So
That'd be
yeah.
awesome. That, by the way, that is a perfect description of Steven, that you're a life munchkin.
Only that worked out in real life. I'll get back to you guys and see if I've successfully rigged life or not.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like you're getting there. Just takes a little bit longer in life because you can't skip past the boring parts like you can in movies.
That's right.
On that same thing, Widziminiv. Okay, this username is WZTVM. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Says, I'm a bit confused by Inuyasha's comment that he considers the natural world to be cute and not deceiving. I thought you guys had discussed such things before, and I could see Katrina rolling her eyes right there a bit. And yeah, I mean, okay, I understand that is not actually how the natural world works, but I kind of have a Disney-fied version of the entire outside world where birds are always singing and never eating each other. So yeah, I know there's plenty of death and deceiving in the natural world.
Yeah, it's horrific. We should get rid of it.
We should have this discussion on a podcast someday. Yeah. Googleplex Bytes also says that regarding lying, improving lying capabilities, K. Anders Ericsson, a psychologist and scientific researcher, has a paper titled The Role of Deliberate Practice in the Acquisition of Expert Performance. It suggests that learning requires deliberate practice. So simply repeating a task in a manner that doesn't challenge you does not lead to improvement. For example, I walk all the time. I even commute to work by foot, but my ability to walk is only at the level of functional. And then it was also pointed out later that, yes, but acting, on the other hand, is basically just lying, and people can get better at acting. So I suppose just lying doesn't make you better with lying. You have to
increase your challenge level to get better at lying.
Yeah, start lying to smarter and smarter people, or more and more paranoid people.
I mean, I would advise practicing that if and only if you're planning on getting into like international espionage. Right. I think,
like presidency.
Yes.
You don't need to be a good liar to be president.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Good God.
We have lowered that bar.
Yeah.
Salespeople must have some increased skills in lying.
Yes, I would imagine.
Taryn nods enthusiastically.
Oh, yeah, you do work in sales, don't you? I'm never going to trust you again.
And all this time he's been trying to sell us on drugs.
I mean, yeah, right.
Worked.
I think I'm a pretty honest salesman, but
you would say that.
By my nature, I have to change people's opinions on things, so I think I do it honestly. I'm pretty sure I'm an honest salesman. I can confidently say that.
Well, the benefit is like, and you and I have talked about this, that you're selling stuff that you can get behind personally.
I'm selling something that I can be honest about it.
Right.
And
Yes.
it still goes good.
Since we're almost done, I was hoping, Stephen, you would tell us that cute story about lying to your girlfriend. Or was that what it was?
That's right. Yeah, I mentioned after on our post-episode chat that I had a story that I forgot to share during the lying episode, where I successfully lied to my partner. She was getting her master's in New York, and the difference was that I'd asked her beforehand, because not like the day before, but sometime before. I said, "Hey, would you be all right if I deceived you so that I could surprise you for a trip at some point in the future?" And she said yes. And so if she hadn't said that, then I wouldn't have done this. But since she did, I was like, all right, I got this. So like the day before, I was at work and I took pictures, I guess this might have been before I was on Snapchat or before Snapchat was a thing. But hey, look, boring day at work. And the clock is clearly visible in the background, but not like the center. So it's not super obvious. Anyway, so I bought Wi-Fi on the plane so that I could send pictures like, yeah, I just bored at work, that sort of thing. But the reason that I thought it was fun was because I successfully tricked her, and then I showed up at her apartment, and she thought I was halfway through a shift at work,
right.
1,000 miles away, so it was really funny. But the trick was that it was agreed upon beforehand that I could trick her about it, right? And I think that the only reason that I felt compelled to ask permission was not because she's such a stickler for the truth, but because I am. I would have felt really dishonest, even if I knew it was all in fun, to know that I could lie that well and misrepresent reality to her that fluidly. So as long as we didn't actually talk about my philosophical discontents with lying, and basically it does come down to the idea that if you're lying to somebody, you're taking it upon yourself to say, I know what your model of reality should be. You shouldn't have the real one. You should have this fake one, and I'm going to determine which fake one you should have. That puts you in a really arrogant position.
I know we talked about this briefly in one of our early episodes, like maybe number 1 or number 2, where I consider lying to be a hostile act. You are misrepresenting the world to other people. You are damaging their map of reality. And that will have consequences later on. Their map of reality is less accurate because you have sabotaged it, and they cannot make decisions as well as they would have otherwise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Any other last things we want to jump on, or?
The Googleplex Bytes also says at the end, the reason loved ones would be better at lying to you is that you trust them more. Which, yeah, that's sad. You waste a lot less mental effort assessing the truth value of your statement, but isn't that the whole point of trust?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really good point. I don't know if we articulated that when we were pointing out that people that you trust are easier to lie to you, but that's the whole point.
But also, they're more likely to do the kind lies, right? The your hair looks great kind of lie.
Sure.
Yeah.
I try not to do that one.
Same. I try not to do that either, because if I ask my partner, hey, how does my hair look? If she could say, yeah, you should do this with it because it doesn't look like you want it to look. I want to know that, right? I wouldn't ask. I guess that sort of depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Are you asking because you want to be told the nice thing, in which case you're not really asking the question. You're asking, tell me I look good.
In which case you're the liar.
Pretty much, yeah. So
I've had that sort of situation where a partner would ask me, what would you think about me cutting my hair shorter? And I'm like, well, I'm not really that much into short hair, but I would still love you, and it's your body. So, that is truth, and yet kind of assuaging their fears, because when someone's asking something like that, they're usually asking, are you still going to like me, right? Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, of course. I believe that's everything.
All right, thanks, guys.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I know we're coming up on the end of our time, so we're going to roll out. Thank you to Kyle Moore for our awesome sound job. I hope you guys noticed that the podcast sounds a lot better. Thanks to our Patreon supporters. Check us out on iTunes. We finally this came out yesterday. We finally got our logo working. You guys will hopefully have noticed that by now. Woohoo! It was anyway. It's on iTunes now. So now you're no longer looking at that little microphone with the waves coming out of it. Yeah. And what am I leaving out?
If you want to comment on this episode, you can do so at thebayesianconspiracy.com or at the subreddit /r/thebayesianconspiracy.
Cool. Thanks for listening.
All right. Good night. You guys gotta say bye too.
Bye.
Awesome.
Flushing your toilet is the best drug ever.